Okay, recording started. Uh, Hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here on a Sunday. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining. Uh, we are GDG Sari and we have an excellent session for you today presented by Alden. Yeah, let me tell you a few more things about GDG Sari, what we do, where are we based in. So yeah. We are a GDG Surrey community based in Metro Vancouver area in Canada. We are uh, a group of people who love to collaborate, who love to, contribute to the community and help everyone. So we envision a diverse and inclusive tech community where everyone feels empowered, learn, and share and grow. Our goal is to unite not only developers and tech professionals, but everyone and the local community members who are curious about the technology. We aim to simplify the world of tech, making it accessible and engaging for everyone. Our community is a place where new starters can start their tech journey, an expert can share their knowledge, and together everyone can collaborate on innovative solutions to solve a real world problems. Whether we are dedicated to creating a collaborative environment that promotes the convergence of ideas and expertise that helps in advancing transformative tech education and development. So we have a GDG community page. I will post the link in the chat so that everyone can take a look and explore more about the community and the events that we have. Uh, Behind each and every community, there are community members, volunteers who are helping us with all the events and everything. On this call today, we have Preeti Yadav. She is the GDG organizer. Myself, Ria, and Sam, who are the GDG Sari co-organizers. And we have a core team of members and volunteers who are always there to help us with all kind of events and all kind of with anything they can do. I would just like to shout out their names. They are Justine, Saundarya, Yashi, Vakas, Vishneet, Tarandeep, Vaishnavi, Mamta, and Aishwarya. Uh, so I just wanted to give you a heads up. So today's session, uh, Eldon is going to present. Any questions, any one of you have, you can go to the Slido. Just type GD Sari and you can add your questions on the Slido. I will also post the Slido link in the chat for everyone to access. Uh, Talking more about today's session. So today we are glad to have Eldon with us. Eldon is a Fulbright student sponsored by US Department of State. He studied computer science in Spain, France, and Switzerland, and graduating as a valedictorian, meaning a student which have a highest academic achievements of the class. He has completed 4 internships and has been a Google Summer of Code contributor for Django. He has received public grant to undertake research on natural language processing and has been recognized for leadership and academic excellence through several awards. He is also a founder of 3 associations and actively contributes to open source. So I'm really glad that we have Eldon to help us understand more about the homoglyph-based attacks and circumventing LLM detectors. Uh, Few more details about the session. We will begin by explaining the idea behind homoglyphs, characters that look similar but are encoded differently. We will learn how this can be used to manipulate tokenization and evade detection systems. We will cover the mechanisms on how homoglyphs alter text representation, discuss their impacts on existing LLM detectors, and present a comprehensive evaluation of their effectiveness against various detection methods. So over to you, Alden. I will stop my share.
Well, thanks a lot for the introduction. Really.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really what we're gonna do. And well, I'll add something new. I put like some more new content. So we're also gonna talk about what to do about it. Like how to, well, just utilize safeguards against those attacks. But we'll get to that point of the presentation later on. I'll share my screen first of all. So you should be seeing the screen, right? Like here we have it. Yes.
Yes, that is correct.
Very good.
I'm able to
Very good.
see us.
Perfect. That's fantastic. So, yeah, well, thanks for the introduction, really. Um, First of all, however, I'd like to just, well, make a few important notes before we really get started. First thing, I'm gonna try to be more accessible rather than precise. Like I think it's for a 45-minute session, it makes sense. So if you want um, to get like the real information, what I mean by that is like the papers that this is based on, you will have the references in the slides. You can just take like notes of that, and I'll give you the bibliography at the end, so you can go and check that out if you're interested in knowing more. You'll have the real information because I'm gonna simplify some of the things. Like I'm not gonna be 100% accurate, so I think it's important to point that out. Another thing is that I'll mention important messages throughout the presentation, and I'm gonna put like a pink box around the message. You can see an example here, right? Like we'll have some takeaways at the end of each of the sections, and that's like the main ideas about the presentation. So we will have those things, and at the end of the presentation we'll go back and we'll collect them to build like a nice summary of what we learned today. So that's another thing about the presentation. Now we are ready to get started, and I'm going to skip the introduction about who I am. Doesn't matter because we already had the introduction a second ago. What I'll say is that this is based on this paper I like, well, published on Archive. It's about this homoglyph thing, but before we really talk about homoglyphs, we need to understand what they are, right? So what are homoglyphs? What's this thing? Well, very simple idea. Just imagine you have like, I don't know, a set of different letters. All of them look like A's, but if I ask you what letter comes up when you write an A on your keyboard, so you press letter A, what's the one that would come like that would show, on your screen? It's only one of them, right? So, well, of course, you wouldn't be able to tell, I guess, but the one that comes up is the second one, and all of the others are not A's. Like they are different things, right? You can see that they have different numbers. So, like for example, the one on the left is letter alpha, then we have the real A, and we have other letters. So all of those are what we call homoglyphs. And the idea of the homoglyphs are just characters that look identical, but this is important, they have different meanings, or this is what we actually care about. They have different encodings, so different numbers. The computer sees different things. So that's very important, right? And of course, this is not something new. It has past applications. So it was used in the past for things like URL attacks, phishing. Like when you get like an SMS on your phone and like it says, "Oh, click here," and actually it's not the real URL. It has like something strange. That used to be a security risk. It got patched because there's a thing called pony code, which is basically a thing that translates the URL. When you click there and it has like a special character, it converts it into something like this. So absolutely different. So that's patched. But one of the other things that has been used in the past, and I think it's like interesting to talk about, is hiding information. And what I mean by that is I'll give you just one example. Imagine, I don't know, you're communicating with someone, but no one can know your secret message. I don't know. You set a rule, right? I give you a text and I tell you, if the first A in this text, it means that, I don't know, I'm trapped or something, you should call the police. I don't know. But you look at the text and you see, oh, okay, the first A is not an alpha. So everything is all right. I don't need to call the police. Just you can hide information using homoglyphs, right? So those are two of the usages that existed before, but here we are going to focus on the applications when it comes to the detection of texts. The key message, the takeaway for this section, pink box, that means takeaway, is that homoglyphs in general are characters that as humans we can't discern, but actually they mean different things. And it's different encodings for the computer, right? So that's the takeaway. Now we know what homoglyphs are, but we maybe don't know so much about how the text detection is performed. So let's have some words on that. How can we detect generated text? Well, to talk about that, I'd love to have a word about first classifiers, which are a type of detectors that basically just take a text, they train a model to extract some key features of the text, and then what you can do is that you can take an embedding. An embedding is just a vector, it's just a set of numbers, right? And you can plot that embedding in a, for example, 2D graph like here. So I have my text, that text is going to be processed by a model, and then it gives me a point in space. So you can see, for example, that here red points are generated text, artificial intelligence text, for example, and blue points are human texts. So they land in different regions of space. And that means that if my point is here, for example, I can say, oh, this is a human text. And if it lands here, I can say, ah, no, it's AI, you know? So that's a little bit how they work. Of course, it's the simplified version, but we just need to have like the general idea. So those are classifiers, but we have other types of detectors as well. The second type that I think is very interesting to talk about is a thing that's called perplexity based. So what they do basically is to utilize LLMs to evaluate texts. And for that, let's just have a very few like words on how LLMs work, because we need to understand that to understand how the measurement of perplexity is done. But for the purposes of this presentation, LLMs are just statistical models, so things that will take a phrase and will process the phrase and will tell us what to feel in that phrase. So we are playing a game of filling the gap all the time, right? So, for example, as a hobby, I like to collect, and I ask the model, what's the word that comes after that? And maybe I'll get a distribution like this. So, for example, the model here is telling me, oh, I'm 30% sure that the next thing should be things. And if it's not things, maybe it should be with a 21% probability, it should be books, or stamps 20%, etc. So what we do here is that we pick one of the words that have the top probabilities, for example books, and we complete the sentence using that word, and we just repeat this process all the time. So that's an example of an AI generated sentence. But now I'll give you another example. Let's say we have, as a hobby, I like to collect bracelets. So this is human written, right? I just wrote the word myself. Let's go back to the probability distribution. Let's see where bracelet is. Oh, it's very, very down below, like it's at just a 0.01% probability. So that means that the model doesn't predict bracelets here. So it means that it's human, right? Like the probability of books is much higher. So that means that the perplexity of the model when it sees that word is lower. The model is not surprised when it sees the word books, but it's surprised when it sees the word bracelets. So that means that bracelets is going to be, I wrote it the other way around, sorry. This is human written and this is AI generated. So books, AI generated because it has a low perplexity, and bracelets has a high perplexity, it's human written. I think that's clear, right? It's a pretty intuitive idea. We just need to repeat this thing for the whole text, and then we get a prediction. So that's how it works with perplexity-based detectors, the second of the systems. The third one, and the last one I'll be talking about, is a thing that's called a watermark detector. And well, I am gonna simplify even more here, but I think it's interesting to talk about watermarks, in part because they are a thing that's very trendy now. So if you go to the news, you will see that like everyone is talking about these things, right? Specifically because OpenAI apparently has a watermark on ChatGPT, but they will not release what it is. So, well, there's some conversations around that right now. Let's see how this watermarking thing works. You'll remember that the task of LLMs is just to predict the next word. So usually we would just pick one of the top words, right? Like before we chose books. But what if we have a rule? So, for example, I'll give you a simple rule. Pick the word number n. How do you choose n? Well, n is the number of letters that you had in the previous word. So we look at the sentence. As a hobby, I like to collect, and that has 7 letters. So we follow the rule. We go to the probability distribution and we count here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So our word is not going to be any other word. It's going to have to be plants necessarily, right? Because we have this rule. So we always complete with the seventh or whatever number it is. It depends on the previous word. So that's how we can do a watermark. We always choose words that fit the context, but at the same time, the secret rule, the secret watermark, us can know about. It's just us who know about the rule. So the text does look weird, but it has a secret mark that we can detect. We repeat that for the whole of the text, and then the text will clearly be watermarked. If it's like we can statistically very certainly say that that text is generated. So watermarks are a very solid tool, but what happens when we attack those things? Well, that's when homoglyph-based attacks are going to start playing the role. And for that, I could just tell you what it is, but I think it's a stronger message if I show you. So I'm going to change my screen, and I'll stop sharing for a second, and I'll do a short demo on what this is. So just let me share my screen. Ba-ba-bum. Very good. Okay. Share screen window, and here we go. So here you can see a Hugging Face space that I was coding to just demonstrate this idea. So let's take a text, okay? And I'm just gonna replace 5% of the characters with homoglyphs. So, those characters that look the same, etc. Okay, so what happens here? I'm gonna copy this text. So this is the original text, nothing is changed. And I'm just gonna paste it in an AI detector. I just picked, like a random website. So what happens here? Okay, let's check. Is it AI? Yes, it's AI. Okay, now I replaced 5% of the characters here. So I'm gonna copy that text, and you see it looks the same. Like I'm just gonna paste it here, and you'll see that you probably wouldn't be able to tell that it has homoglyphs. I'm gonna paste it now. You don't see the changes probably, right? It's hard to tell that there's homoglyphs here. So I mean, maybe you can tell because like some of the words are like just highlighted here, but like if you didn't have that, you wouldn't really be able to tell. So what happens if we check if this has AI? Okay. Oh, fuck. Sorry. I'm just gonna use a different detector. I was testing this detector before. Let me just paste it here. So original text, it should say that this is human. Sorry, this is AI generated, right? This is the original text, no homoglyphs, AI generated. I'm gonna go to this detector, and I'm gonna run the detector again. You see that here the font maybe is like a little bit more evident. It depends on what font you utilize. Here it's harder to tell. Here it's harder to tell as well. It really depends. But the interesting part here is that it tells us, oh, it's human generated. And this really, I could take like any other detector, this one, well, it just doesn't let me do it anymore because it has a limit. But you could take basically any detector and it's very effective. So that's a little bit for the demo. I just thought it was like a stronger message to show you rather than to tell you how it works. Now, the question becomes, if the text becomes unrecognizable, how does it exactly affect each of the detectors? And you'll see that, well, different detectors, different techniques or systems are affected in clearly different ways. So I'll explain now. You remember that we had those systems that were classifiers some minutes ago, right? Like they were systems that extracted properties from text and then they told us this is AI, this is human. You'll remember that we had this example with a point here and we were saying, oh, this is AI because it's here. So what happens when we apply homoglyphs to texts? What happens is this thing. The result that we get is in a completely separate, different region of the space. So like if I just tell you a point here, you wouldn't really be able to tell me, oh, this is a red point or this is a blue point, because it's, completely separate. It's just not belonging to any of the subspaces that we can see here, right? So that's the first thing. It's very hard to tell whether that's AI or human because it's completely separate from the things that we usually see. But another thing is that the points here are much more mixed. So you can see that we have human examples here and AI examples here, and it's like there's not like a very clear boundary. Is it here, is it here, is it here? It's harder to tell. Here we have a boundary pretty clearly, but when we apply homoglyphs, the embeddings are in a completely different region and they are more mixed. So it's very hard for classifiers to just classify them correctly. That's a problem. They get very confused. So that's how it affects classifiers from a technical point of view. But what happens, for example, to perplexity-based detectors? How are they affected? Well, let's go back to the example before. As a hobby, I like to collect books. Very good. That's our sentence, but when we apply homoglyphs, we don't have the same situation, right? The computer will see something like this, like as a hop, I to like it doesn't recognize the words. So if I try to calculate probabilities here, what's the probability of the something I don't understand? Nothing, right? It's a word I've never seen, so the probability of that is super low. So I'm just going to say, oh, this is, of course, human written because I'm very perplexed to see that this is the text, right? So the perplexity-based detectors are also affected by homoglyph-based attacks in this way. But what happens to the third type? What happens to watermarks? Well, if we think about the same example, so as a hobby, I like to collect plants, this was an example that was following the rule. Now, we apply homoglyphs, and the rule that we had was you pick the nth word, and n is the number of letters that you had before. So, for example, here you could say, oh, well, this thing is like something I don't recognize. So probably maybe, it could be like a space or a separator or something. So the number of letters here is lect, this thing here. So, okay, that's my word, 5 characters. So the next word has to be postcards. But what do I have? Oh no, I have plants. So it doesn't follow the rule. It's human written. So each detector is affected in a separate way, but in general, it looks like probably they are very affected, right? Like they just stop recognizing the text, so they get confused and they don't really recognize that. But the question now becomes, like we probably get the idea, right? But how effective is it? Does it affect, I don't know, 60% of the texts, 70, 80? just give me numbers, right? Like when we do research, we need to measure things. So I'll tell you a little bit about the experimental approach that, well, we were following for assessing how the different detectors were affected by this. Basically, the experimental approach was very simple. We took 2,000 texts, 1,000 of them were human, 1,000 were AI, and we just replaced different percentages of the texts with homoglyphs. Then we created like some sets of text, attacked texts and texts without attacks, and we run those texts through a lot of detectors, different systems, and then we aggregated the results. And that's what I'm going to show you now. So, what are the results? Okay, first I'll show you the example with one detector. So you can see here that this detector was very good, right? Because we had 1,000 human texts, and out of that 1,000, 980 were correctly labeled as human. That's very good. And out of the generated texts, 963 were generated were labeled as generated. So that's what we'd like to see, like that's perfect. But what happens when we start attacking the system? Well, this is what happens. Literally no texts whatsoever are classified as generated. 100% of them are classified as human. That's a strong result. Like it's very hard to see, like when you're doing research, it's quite unusual to see that something works 100% of the time, or that something is well, an absolute, you know success. Well, in this case, I'd say that it is very effective, really very effective. That's one of the systems that we were trying. You can see here that we had a good effectivity at the start, but then when we start rewriting, it just goes down to zero. Even with just 5% of replacement, we don't need to even go higher. With 5%, the precision is just like nothing at all. But what happens with other detectors? Well, you'll see that originally other detectors on other data sets have different performances. So like some of them are just not very good to start with. For example, this one was not very good, but some of them are really good, like 94, 93, that's pretty good. So some of the detectors work very well, but when we start replacing, does it happen with all of them? How are they affected? Well, I'll reveal that to you now. I think this like just speaks for itself, really. This is a strong result. In fact, it's so strong that I was like a little bit shocked to find it was working so well. But if you think about it, like the technical justification makes sense, right? And well, this brings us to an interesting point, which is that all of the detectors are ineffective, and it has strong implications. You could think about, for example, Twitter bots. If you want to detect LLMs writing on Twitter, or I don't know, Blue Sky, or whatever this social media of choice is, it's going to become harder to detect those texts if you were trying to use one of the systems that we studied in here. Or cases of academic misconduct. We could also think about, I don't know, fraud, identity theft. There's a lot of things that we could talk about. But maybe something that worries me even more is the fact that this has a very low access barrier, because when you want to just evade generated text detectors, usually you have to do things like paraphrasing. And paraphrasing needs, in general, an LLM to do the rewriting. Or, you need to, basically, the idea is that you need to spend either a lot of time or a lot of computing power to evade detectors. The problem with this technique is that it doesn't need anything, really. It's a very simple technique, right? Like you just need to replace some of the characters. So everyone can do it. You can do it on the website I was showing you in the demo. So it's a very low access barrier. And that means that there's a very high risk. It's so easy for me to just start using homoglyphs to evade detectors. So that's perhaps where I'd be most worried about. In general, this adds to, I mean, there's already evidence about this, but I think this also adds to the evidence that AI generated text detectors are very unreliable. We can't really trust them, you know? And that's, well, that's a, yeah, that's a thing that I was worried about. And I wanted to change this presentation a little bit to end on a more positive note. So this is the new part of the presentation. I'd love to talk a little bit about safeguards. What can we do to protect us from, well, that attack, right? And well, of course, if I ask you now, what can you do? You'll probably tell me that what we can do is to restrict the input, right? Like if the text contains homoglyphs, if we detect that there's that type of characters in the text, we just raise an alarm, right? Oh, so it looks like that works. You know, we have the detector, we add an extra layer, and that's like our homoglyph alarm. That's a pretty intuitive idea, and I think it can work in some of the cases, like probably in the majority of cases that would work. The problem is that if we want to build a generic text detector, a detector that works all the time, maybe that's not enough. And I'll tell you why. I'll give you one example here. Okay, just this is just like a text. I like don't even read the text. I just want you to look at the parts that are highlighted here. Those are problems. Those are problems because they, like, if we use a simple naive approach in the sense of I'm going to raise an alarm if I see that there's homoglyphs in my text, I would be raising an alarm here because I have homoglyphs. But well, I mean, just think about it. Like if homoglyphs exist, it's not because Unicode decided to make things more complex for everyone. It's because Unicode saw that people actually need to use homoglyphs sometimes, and there's, well, usages that are reasonable for them, you know? So homoglyphs play a role sometimes, and we can't just say, oh, if there's homoglyphs, we raise an alarm. That doesn't work. And it's hard to be generic about detecting homoglyphs. Of course, in some cases, it's very easy, right? If I'm writing poetry, I guess, like if I'm writing English poetry, I wouldn't be seeing a lot of homoglyphs, I think. But if I'm building a general detector, we need to do something else. That we would have false positives when we detect some of the text. So we need to get smarter. So how? What can we change here? What can we do? Well, I'll give you an idea. So if you look here at this chart, you'll see that we had one text, and we can see how the log likelihood of the different words in the text was changing. So the log likelihood, you can think it's a perplexity. Okay, so the idea here is that when we don't attack anything, it tends to be around this area. You see, like that's more or less where the values are in this chart, but when we attack, they are lower. So they go to this region. So we could say, oh, okay, well, no problem. If we want to detect homoglyph attacks, we can just take a look at the distribution, and if the distribution is like lower than the average, then we can say there's an attack here and we raise the alarm. So, well, I hate to break the news to you, but it's not so easy again. Like it's a little bit more complex. The problem here is that, for example, if I give you the US Constitution, this is a text that has a very low perplexity. So if we just use this approach of low perplexity, we don't raise an alarm, we would not raise an alarm with the US Constitution. But then as the text becomes more complex, or for example, we have other languages which contain homoglyphs actually, right? The the perplexity just varies a lot, like depending on the text. So we are not going to be able to use this approach to raise an alarm. Like it's just unusable. So we would again have false positives here if we just try to rely on the perplexity values to raise an alarm saying, hey, there's a homoglyph attack here. This doesn't work. So Perplexity values are not enough. Again, we need to get smarter than that. And I'll give you another idea. Let's keep thinking about this a little bit. So perplexity values are not enough. But let's focus on the general picture. Let's focus on the distribution. Because something that's true is that in general, attack texts tend to have lower values of log likelihood, which means higher values of perplexity compared to original texts without attacks, right? So this is something that we can actually use. We could normalize the texts, and what I mean by that is we could take a text that has homoglyphs, turn it into a version without homoglyphs, and measure the perplexity of that. So we normalize the text, we rewrite it into a standard format, and then we can see that maybe there's a ratio here that we can use. Perplexity ratios, they are enough. So I'll give you the example. The US Constitution, if we eliminate the homoglyphs here, the text is not going to change. So our ratio is just one. It's the same. But if we have a text where we have homoglyphs here, I guess you can't see it, but the things that are highlighted are homoglyphs. If we do this rewriting to eliminate the homoglyphs, then we get back to that one. And that's the ratio. You see here, we have a ratio of 3. So that's when we can raise our alarm. We can base ourselves on the ratios to detect when we have homoglyph attacks. I'd love to show you with a demo how good this is, though I haven't really tested this in depth, so I don't know if it works. I don't have specific evaluation numbers here, but I'll give you the idea of the tool I was building this morning. So I'll share my screen again. Here you have the screen before, and let's just look at some examples. So let me just reload the website. Very good. Here we are. So first text. Let's take a look here. This text is not dangerous. So it doesn't have homoglyphs. So all is good. We don't even need to check for ratios or anything. All is good here. No homoglyphs. Perfect. Now, what happens if we apply homoglyphs here? Again, like you probably can't see it, but this tells us, yeah, this text is dangerous. It has homoglyphs and the difference ratio is very high, right? So alarm triggered. Very good. We are able to trigger our alarm effectively. Now, this one, I don't know why this dangerous thing is not working correctly, but this one doesn't have homoglyphs. So all is good with this one. This one, I'll run it through the model to see that it is dangerous, but the ratio again is higher than, I think I chose like 1.3 for the detector. The difference ratio is higher, so we trigger the alarm, right? Perfect. Now let's take a text that has lives naturally, because it is very interesting to see what happens with the text that, well, really has homoglyphs in a natural setting. What we would have here is that if we replace the homoglyphs, we lose some information. So the system is actually more perplexed when we eliminate the homoglyphs. So here we don't raise an alarm. Here we say, oh, it's all good. It has homoglyphs, but it's not a homoglyph attack. Another example, I'll give you another example here. I chose like something about Greek, which naturally contains homoglyphs. What happens here? Let's check for a second. Again, we see that the ratio is less than 1. So we are more perplexed when we remove the homoglyphs. That's a good sign. The alarm works again. Lastly, I wanted to show you an example with a text that normally contains homoglyphs. And we will see now that with this text, again, it's all good, as you can expect. It's dangerous text. What I mean by dangerous is it contains homoglyphs. But now in this one, what I did was I applied a homoglyph attack. So this text doesn't have a homoglyph attack. It has homoglyphs, but it's not attacked. Now, I'm going to go to this text, which does contain a homoglyph attack. And if I do the same process, if I rewrite the things into a standard format, we can see that that's strong enough to be able to detect, we'll see the result now, to detect that there's a homoglyph attack here. So uh, I think this gives a clear message that the technique seems to work pretty well. Even when we have texts in other languages or texts that naturally contain homoglyphs, this technique still works. I'm going to go back to the presentation again. Here we are. Let me really clarify as a disclaimer that I'm still looking into this thing. I literally built this thing this morning, so I don't have like a comprehensive evaluation or something like that. I don't have a table to give you with it works this percentage of the time. Maybe that will come at some point, but that's not the case yet. So I can only tell you that the idea seems solid and it's probably enough, but I'm still looking into that. There's also other techniques that you could try. I've seen some things on Siamese networks to do like character recognition, for example. Again, like other techniques, I didn't develop them, so you can look around if you're interested. But my message here is that there's work to do here. We have a very strong technique that affects a lot of things and it's very simple to use. We can probably safeguard ourselves against it, but we need to keep innovating. We need to keep doing the work. We need to keep working here. So that's my positive note. Yes, it's well a little bit worrying, but we can do things. There's some work for us to do. So let me just gather the pink boxes that we were seeing throughout the presentation in a recap to build an image of the things that we've learned here today. We saw that homoglyphs are characters that we can't really tell apart, right? Like as humans, we can't discern them. We also saw that there's different detection systems for knowing if something is AI generated. And we also saw that when we apply homoglyph-based attacks, well, the text just becomes unrecognizable. We don't really know what it is anymore, right? So all of the different mechanisms of homoglyph-based attacks try to exploit this confusion that is affecting systems, and it is very effective. Like all of the detectors were just evaded with this technique, and it's a very simple technique to use, no access barrier at all. So that's an increased risk, and in general, I would say that AI text detectors are unreliable. But precisely because of that, there's some work to do. We need to work to be able to ensure that we have strong systems, solid systems that can actually be trusted. So let's keep innovating. Let's do the work. And talking about innovation, improvement, etc., I'd love to end on that note with this QR code, because what this is a form, a feedback form. And I always ask people to fill the form to tell me if they understood the session, what they thought in general, if they had like any comments. So I really, really appreciate it if you can fill in this 20-second form. It really doesn't take any time at all. And as an incentive, I tell you that the bibliography is at the end of the form. So you fill in the form and then you get the link to the bibliography. So it's sort of like a paywall. When you go to the New York Times website, it asks you to register, etc. This is the paywall to the bibliography. But really, I really appreciate it if you can fill in the form, because it helps me improve all the time. So if you can just take 20 seconds, that would be so nice. And having said that, I wanted to, have a quick overview of how this looks like. I think it was, well, short look into how homoglyphs work, etc. But I hope it was interesting. And now, if you have any questions, well, I think they are on Slido. So I'm more than happy to answer anything that comes to your minds. And well, I hope you at least got like the general concepts of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alden. It was a very detailed, very, well explaining session. And you did a good job explaining what are homoglyphs, what are homoglyph attacks, and more importantly, how can we prevent them? How can we safeguard from those attacks? So we have a few
Thank you.
questions on Slido. So I'm thinking to share my screen so that you can also take a look
Oh,
at the
yeah, yep,
questions and
yep.
then
Sure,
yeah,
sure, sure, sure. So I'll stop sharing here. I'm just gonna paste the link on the chat so everyone can have it here. Yes, there you go. Okay, very good. Perfect. So yeah, yeah, feel free to go ahead.
let's see if you're able to. Okay, I think you should be able to see the Slido
Perfect.
questions.
Yes.
So
Okay. Very
yeah,
good.
I,
So.
I can read through the questions and then you can go ahead and answer. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Okay, yeah. The first question is from Alka. She's asking that are there four subspecies for human AI generated AI attacked and human attack classifiers, and what classifier and reduction techniques are used?
So I think you're talking about like this example where we had like the chart, where we had like different colors, the red, the blue, etc. Yes. So that's true. I'd say maybe in rather there's three subspaces. So we had like the clearly red part, right? The clearly blue part, and then we had like this sort of mixture that was like purple and green, and those were the attacked texts, and they were very mixed. So I would say that we have rather three um, like subspaces where we have the different types of embeddings. Now, on the last part of the question, what classifier and what reduction technique are used here? I was using ArgueGPT. So that's a text detector. Like it's a model that's available on Hugging Face. And for the reduction technique, I was using. I think I did the graph with UMAP, but maybe it was TSNE. I don't remember 100% on the top of my head, but it was like, just a standard technique. I think it's probably UMAP. So I hope that answers the question. UMAP and ArgueGPT.
Thank you, Alden. It did answer my question. Uh, it was interesting to see that how human generated and AI generated texts were almost in the same cluster. Shouldn't it have been a little far apart?
Yeah, that's the thing. I agree. So when I got, like, I was like literally. I'll tell you how I came to this like chart. I was doing research. It was like 23 p.m. Super late in the night, and I was like coding the thing, and then I saw this chart, and I thought, wow, this is impressive, because my expectation was that even if you apply a homoglyph attack, probably you would maybe the homoglyph attacked texts would be in a different subspace. I That's what I would expect. But what I didn't expect was that they were like they would be so mixed, and well, you saw it before. They are super mixed, and should they be more apart? Yes, of course, but that's the thing. Like, this technique is so effective because the detector literally just can't tell them apart. Can't tell them apart. So that's why they are so mixed. So I think it's a very strong result. I was also like a little bit shocked to see that when I just was plotting the thing, but yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting result, right? Like, I think it's not what you would expect straight away. Like, you would expect this to be less effective, but well, reality is reality. So yeah.
Yeah, it was dangerously interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you so much, Sheldon, for answering the question. So there is a question from Amin as well, but I would encourage Amin if you are able to unmute yourself and talk more about your question. Else, we can just I can read and Alden can answer that. So
Yeah, but it would be helpful maybe to have a little bit more context, because I'm not exactly sure like what's like the lasting effects about. So I mean, like, if you
Okay,
can't.
so
Mhm.
I was just saying,
yeah,
look, if let's say you apply a glyph to your test, right? You wanted to circumvent AI detectors detecting your test. Once you submit that test, will it be a problem in the future when you want to maybe use that test for another thing, or because of the homoglyphs, if you do copy or edit, is that going to have any effect on the test? I mean,
Oh, maybe okay. I'm not sure. I'll repeat what I understood, and then you tell me if this is your question. Okay. So I think you're asking. I'll give you one example. I write my text. Let's say I'm writing, I don't know, like a doctoral thesis or something. I write my thesis and I use a homoglyph-based attack to rewrite the thesis. I submit this thesis, it's all good, it doesn't get detected, but 5 years later, someone implements a detector, sort of like, for example, in the way that we were seeing at the end of the presentation, someone implements this detector and suddenly my text raises the alarm. Hey, there's a homoglyph attack here. So my understanding is that you are asking about this, like the lasting effect. Like, will this thing, like if I use a homoglyph-based attack, will this come back to haunt me 5 years later? Is
yeah,
this your question? Or? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Okay.
exactly.
Very good question. So yes, I mean, of course. So like homoglyphs are still gonna be here, and in fact, I think that's maybe another incentive to start adopting homoglyphs, like homoglyph detectors, mm, like right now, because like you can detect that people were using those attacks. Of course, I have no idea if people are using them or not, but if people are using them, you're gonna be able to tell about this 5 years later. And it's the same thing as with watermarks. People, like, maybe people are copying things from ChatGPT today, and we don't know what the OpenAI watermark is. We don't know what rule they are using, but if in 5 years from now they publish their watermark, they publish what rule they are using, we are gonna be able to detect that today people are using ChatGPT to detect texts. So I'd say yes, this can haunt you in 5 years' time, and also watermarks can haunt you in 5 years' time, and some of the techniques that people are using can haunt you like a little bit later on. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have another question from uh, someone in the call. How is the new detection for homoglyphs work? Are you recreating or adding a layer in the LLM?
So well, I mean, I think probably this is sort of answered by the last part of the presentation, right? Because, like, I guess probably this question was asked before I got to the last bit where, I was explaining how we can do this ratio comparison thing. So I hope that answers the question already, but if it doesn't, let me know and I'll.
Yeah. I'm the one who asked the question. It's Elsa. I will be honest, maybe that part flew by me. I guess I'm just not sure on when you're detecting it. Like I'm unclear on like the inputs and outputs and where it's doing the detection because I'm still unclear if it's a rule-based mechanism or if it's something you're adding embedded into the to the LLM.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for the question, because maybe that wasn't so clear, right? Because I was talking about this safeguard, but I didn't explicitly mention that this would be an extra step in the pipeline. So you have a detector, it
Mhm.
takes a text, and you would have an extra step, which is the homoglyph alarm. Your detector would make a prediction, but the problem is that if you have a homoglyph attack, the prediction would be wrong. Like, your detector is just going to tell you this is human.
Mhm.
So what you want instead is to have an extra step that bypasses the detector. If I have a homoglyph attack, then I raise the alarm straight away. I don't go to the detector or anything. I skip that step and I say, hey, there's a problem here. How do you do that? You do it with the technique I was explaining before. So, like a ratio comparison. You could use different LLMs. I was using GPT-2 for the example in the web app, but it works with most of them. So, uh, like it would
Yeah,
be an
so
extra step.
yeah.
Mhm.
So what I'm hearing, and let me know if this is right. What I'm hearing is basically you have an extra step in the pipeline that would be a rule-based, a rule-based,
Yes.
effectively to then see. Okay, and that goes into my next question, which is, like if you were to mix and match, like let's say I have homoglyphs in my output, and then I add things like my own spin or text, human generated. It sounds like what you're then saying before, if you have enough of a ratio, um,
Mhm.
then that's even if you add human generated text, like my own text, in between here and there, if the ratio is high enough, then that would be enough to trigger the that homoglyphs are detected and it's AI generated. And let me know if that sounds right.
Well, so my understanding is like you would try to evade the generated text detector
Hmm.
by at the same time rewriting the text yourself and changing some of the words, which is one
Yeah.
technique to avoid the detector. And then at
Mhm.
the same time, you're also applying a homoglyph attack. So you're doing the two things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, on that case, it would still, so it would I'm pretty sure it would not trigger the detector, so like it would not trigger the this is AI detector,
Hmm.
but it would still trigger the this has a homoglyph attack detector, because literally at the moment where you start putting homoglyphs, and you really need just a very small percentage of homoglyphs, like 5% or things like that.
Oh, okay.
When you start putting even just a few of them,
Hmm.
the ratio just explodes. I was showing some examples before. Again, I don't have like a comprehensive evaluation,
Yeah.
but my feeling right now is that even just with a few homoglyphs, it would trigger this alarm of there's an attack here.
And that's
So
only in English, right? Like with like as you pointed out with other languages, because they naturally have what I would think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, um, they have the homoglyphs. Then
so
mhm.
maybe I can show an example here. It's so because I think that's a very good question, and maybe it wasn't so clear. So let me clarify. Can I share my screen for a second?
I think you are sharing.
And no, this is not my screen.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Did I
I'll show.
touch
No,
Sorry,
no,
go ahead.
I'll show you now. So yeah, so let's go to the tool again. So here you can see that the last example I was showing here was an example in another language. So we take a text here where you can say that, where you can see that we have words that have homoglyphs. You can see like accents, and you see like different letters that do have homoglyphs. But when we try to detect this thing, it
Mhm.
is a dangerous text. It has homoglyphs, but the ratio still it's not enough. Now, I'm gonna take this text, okay, and I'll instead of taking the example from down below, I'm gonna show you the process. So I'm gonna take this original text and I'm gonna go to a rewriter. So I go to this rewriter here. I paste my text. I'll rewrite 5% of the characters, and I get a text with homoglyphs. So this one does have the attack, right? So
Mhm.
now I have, let's say, the homoglyphs that are here because they make sense in the context of the text, and I have on top of that other homoglyphs that shouldn't be here. I paste this here, and let's see what happens. Alarm triggered. So you see, even when we have homoglyphs that are naturally here, like they make sense in the context of the text, the detector still works to detect that we have a homoglyph attack. So I hope that's clearer. Did it clarify your question?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It clarifies. Yeah, there's a few layers in the question too, which is always fun, right? Here, let me actually go back to my question. So in the original question is basically, let's say I have the attack, and then I add like a sentence of my own.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
it sounds like because even if you have a small percentage of the homoglyphs with mixed in with human generated text like my own, because the ratio is small enough, like there's, like you said, it's 5%, for example, it will trigger that it's AI generated.
Yes.
It'll trigger it has homoglyphs.
Oh, that could, okay, thank you, William.
So that's
Homoglyphs, that would mean that it's AI generated, right?
well, not necessarily. It just means that there's an attack here. So why did you try to perform the homoglyph-based attack on this text? Probably because it's AI generated. I mean, maybe you could also apply the attack on a human text, of course, right? But why would you?
Yeah, it's not
So-
about
so-
yeah. It's not about applying it to human generated text. It's more, the purpose would be, I created this AI generated thing. It looks amazing, but I don't want it to trigger the alarm, so I'm gonna add my own text to try and hack it to say that it's not triggered, like it's not AI generated. But this
Yeah.
helps me understand how it works, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, and
yeah.
again, just to be 100% clear, doing that is a way to evade the detectors of generated text. What's the problem with just rewriting the thing myself? The problem is that I need time. For example, if I want to build an army of, I don't know, 100,000 Twitter bots that are able to evade the detectors, I'm not going to have people that go and write manually. For me, it's much easier to use this attack, to use homoglyphs to evade the detectors. So your thing would work, rewriting the text. It's just that it takes time, or it takes a lot of computing power, so it's hard to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, you could also just take like a snippet from something that was human generated on the internet, assuming that you think it's human generated, and then like go from there. I mean, like, you could maybe do that. I'm just trying to figure out from just the first initial approach to help me understand like how it works. Realistically, if that's true or not, I don't know. But
I mean,
I appreciate the
like you could take human written texts, and if they are human written, they would be classified as human written. But I mean, I guess it depends on the context, right?
yeah.
If you want to have bots generating text, you would need an LLM to generate the text, so it would be AI generated in general.
Yeah, so I have seen
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry,
yeah.
Elsa and
Yes.
Eldon. We are actually few minutes over time. But yeah, we will share Eldon's profile, LinkedIn profile, so that
Yeah,
you guys can connect offline as well.
if you want to keep asking, like, feel free to write. Like, I'm happy to chat, and like, if something was not clear, I can also clarify. So just message me on LinkedIn, and like we can take it from there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
Similar to
Yeah.
Elsa's question, we also had the fourth question on Slido. Something similar like this. Like if we have some AI text generated text with homoglyphs and we add human input, would it going to generate the false positive? And I feel it was something similar to the discussion that we recently had, right? So yeah, I would encourage everyone to connect with Eldon on LinkedIn and also join us our Discord channel. I will share my screen again. Let's see. Okay, I hope you're able to see this. Before talking about the next event, here is our Discord, QR code to join our Discord channel. Uh, Please join the channel and feel free to ask any questions. We have experts in our team who will help you answer. If you are not able to do it, we will do our best to get the answers from the experts in the industry. So yeah, join us on Discord. And I will talk about the next event that we have. If you are in the Vancouver downtown area, if you are in the Metro Vancouver area, we have the tech chat and networking event coming up on the 1st December. So yeah, I look forward to see you guys there.
Just
So
to add to that, we also have in January, probably in February, we also have Gen AI sessions. It will be a series of sessions from beginner level to advanced level. Please stay connected. These will be virtual, and I believe they would benefit, all of us, because why not, right? The wealth. The knowledge is out there. We have to just join these Google or Zoom meets, and we'll get to share. Having said that, Darshan, should we do the selfie?
Oh, nice. Yeah.
actually, yeah, actually we have got a selfie already. So yeah, we are good
Oh,
in that sense. And
oh wow. Well, there were. Oh, okay, I was in there. Okay.
no, no, you were there. You
I
were
see
there.
it.
So yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I got you.
Okay.
No worries. And
All right.
yeah, I would like to say thank you to Alden and apologies to Elsa for cutting your discussion. But yeah, I will make sure that you guys have connection with each other on LinkedIn so that you can continue your conversation there. So and thanks a lot for everyone joining.
Thank you,
Preeti,
Arjun.
you want to add anything in the end?
Yeah, no, I'm just I was happy looking at the questions, the kind of interaction we had later, because um, this is also a testament of this session itself. We had something to take back at home, and the discussion itself is about. I mean, it gives the sense that actually everybody was engaged, involved, and that this was something that we learned new, and everybody was kind of excited. I feel. While I was in not in the entire session, but I think I'm going to take back this recording and listen to it. And thankful to everybody who joined today.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Really. For me, it was a pleasure. It also you know, led to some interesting thoughts this morning about how to just safeguard those systems. So really, I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm very happy to just have had the great questions and extensive discussions at the end. So thanks a lot, really. Hmm.
Thanks, Sultan. Thanks,
Hmm.
everyone.
Thanks, Eldon. Thank you, Preeti. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.